The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was dated 3 days earlier. The postmark was smeared, barely readable. The envelope was white, standard, with the bank's logo printed in the upper left corner in dark blue, the kind of logo that was supposed to suggest permanence and trustworthiness. Inside was a single page. The heading read, "Notice of Accelerated Foreclosure and Property Seizure." The effective date was listed as midnight of the following Friday. Warren Elias Colt read it once, set it on the kitchen table, looked out the window at the field. He was 74 years old. He had lived on this land for 51 years. The field outside that window, the east field, the one his father had broken by hand in the spring of 1961, was running winter wheat. It had been running winter wheat every year for 51 consecutive years, without exception. Warren had not missed a single planting. Not the year his wife had her surgery, not the year the drought took 40% of the crop, not the year he buried his father under the oak tree at the far edge of the south pasture, came home, washed his hands, and went back out to finish what needed finishing. The letter said the bank was owed $291,400. It said the debt had been determined to be unrecoverable through standard payment channels. It said the property, all 300 acres, the house, the outbuildings, the barn, the creek access, all of it, would be transferred to the bank's Asset Recovery Division at 12:01 a.m. on Friday, October 14, 2022. Warren read it a second time, slower. Then he folded it and set it on top of the other mail. He put on his coat and went out to check the wheat. The Colt farm sits in Garrett County, Maryland, at the far western edge of the state, where the land lifts into the Allegheny Plateau and the fields run long and cold and the winters come early. The nearest town of any size is 18 miles east. The county seat is 24 miles. Warren has made that drive more times than he can count, for seed, for parts, for meetings he didn't want to attend, for funerals he didn't want to go to. His father, Raymond Colt, bought the first 180 acres in 1959 for $34,200. He added the northern parcel, 82 acres, in 1963 for $12,400. He added the creek parcel, 38 acres of bottomland along Bone Run Creek, in 1971 for $8,100. Total, 300 acres, assembled over 12 years, paid for in full by 1978. Raymond Colt owed no bank anything by the time Warren was old enough to drive a tractor. Raymond died in March of 1991. He was 71 years old. He had been ill for 14 months and had spent the last 6 of those months putting things in order. He filed updated deeds. He organized 32 years of records into a metal filing cabinet, 2 drawers, labeled by year in his handwriting, each year's folder containing every document he had produced or received that related to the farm. Payment receipts, tax filings, survey records, insurance documents, correspondence. At the bottom of the second drawer, behind the 1969 folder, Raymond had placed a single document in a plain white envelope. He had written 3 words on the outside of the envelope in pencil: "For the land." He told Warren about it 2 weeks before he died. He said, "If anyone ever comes after this farm, anyone, you open that envelope, not before, not out of curiosity, only if they come." Warren said he understood. Raymond died on a Thursday morning. Warren buried him under the oak tree at the far edge of the south pasture, same as Raymond had always said he wanted. He tamped the earth down flat, stood there for a while, came back and finished the planting. He had not opened the envelope in 31 years. The man who sent the foreclosure letter was named Derek Ash. He was 32 years old. He held a master's degree in finance from the University of Maryland. He had been branch director of agricultural lending for the bank's Western Maryland division for 14 months. In those 14 months, he had initiated 23 accelerated foreclosure proceedings. All 23 had resulted in property transfer. His quarterly performance review described him as results-oriented, efficient, and a strong contributor to the division's legacy asset reduction targets. Derek Ash had reviewed Warren Colt's file on a Wednesday afternoon. He had spent 47 minutes on it, from 2:18 p.m. to 3:05 p.m. The file concerned a revolving agricultural credit line that Warren had opened in 2004 to cover equipment replacement costs. The credit line had been renewed annually for 18 consecutive years. The balance at the time of Derek Ash's review was $291,400. The account had been flagged by the bank's automated system as a legacy liability, a credit line opened before the current lending parameters had been established, carrying terms the bank no longer offered. Derek Ash determined that the account could be reclassified under a provision in the bank's updated lending agreement, a provision added in 2019, 15 years after Warren's credit line was opened, that allowed for accelerated repayment demands on accounts deemed structurally non-conforming. He signed the foreclosure authorization at 3:05 p.m. He moved on to the next file at 3:06 p.m. He had never been to Garrett County. He had not visited the property. He had not spoken to Warren Colt. He had not reviewed the original 2004 lending agreement in full. He reviewed a summary generated by the bank's document processing system, 3 pages, condensed from an original 47-page agreement. Page 31 of the original 2004 lending agreement contained a provision Derek Ash had not read. He would not become aware of page 31 until October 28, 2022, inside Courtroom 4 of the Garrett County Courthouse, in front of the Honorable Patricia Ann Dwyer, who had served on the circuit court bench for 19 years. Warren drove to town the morning after the letter arrived. He did not call ahead. He parked the truck, the same truck he had driven for 22 years, a 2000 Ford F-250 with 214,000 miles on it, in the lot outside the bank's Western Maryland branch office. He had put on his good shirt. His work boots were clean. He walked into the branch and asked to speak with whoever had sent the letter. The receptionist made a call. A young woman came out and explained that Mr. Ash was in a meeting. Warren said he would wait. He sat in one of the chairs in the lobby. He waited 41 minutes. Derek Ash came out at 10:23 a.m. He was wearing a pressed blue suit. He had 2 associates with him, both young, both carrying matching folders. He looked at Warren across the lobby and did not change his expression. He said, "Mr. Colt, the letter explains the situation pretty thoroughly. I'm not sure there's much I can add in person." Warren said, "My father paid this land off in full in 1978. Derek Ash said, "The land isn't the issue, Mr. Colt. The credit line is the issue." Warren said, "The credit line is tied to the land. That's what the 2004 agreement says." Derek Ash smiled, not a warm smile. He looked briefly at one of his associates and back at Warren. He said, "Mr. Colt, with respect, the 2004 agreement has provisions that supersede the original lending terms under our updated policy framework. This is a standard restructuring process. We've been very clear about the timeline." Warren looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "All right." He picked up his hat from the chair beside him. He drove home. He called a lawyer named Franklin Burris that afternoon. Franklin Burris was 61 years old and had practiced agricultural and property law in Garrett County for 33 years. He had handled cases like this before. He was not optimistic. He said, "Warren, if the bank is invoking the 2019 policy amendment, there's a legal basis for it. I won't mislead you. We have options, but I need to be honest. The timeline is tight, and the precedent isn't favorable." Warren said, "There's a document my father left, from 1969. Franklin Burris said, "What kind of document?" Warren said, "I don't know yet. He told me only to open it if someone came after the farm." There was a pause. Franklin Burris said, "Get it. Bring it to my office. Don't open it without me." The filing cabinet was in the basement of the farmhouse. 2 drawers, gray metal, the kind sold by farm supply catalogs in the 1960s and built to last indefinitely. The label on the second drawer read 1961 to 1979. Each folder inside was labeled in Raymond Colt's handwriting, block letters, pencil, precise. Warren pulled the drawer open slowly. The metal ran smooth. His father had oiled the rails every year. He found the 1969 folder. Behind it, at the back of the drawer, was the plain white envelope. 3 words in pencil. "For the land." Warren sat on the basement floor with it for a moment. He was 74 years old, and his knees did not love concrete, but he sat there anyway. He held the envelope and looked at his father's handwriting and thought about a Thursday morning in March of 1991, and a patch of earth at the far edge of the south pasture. He carried the envelope upstairs and drove it to Franklin Burris's office without opening it. They opened it together at Franklin Burris's desk. Inside was a single folded document, one page, letter-sized, typed on a manual typewriter, dated September 4th, 1969. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. The typeface was clean and deliberate. At the top of the page, Deed Restriction and Encumbrance Agreement. Colt Property, Garrett County, Maryland. Franklin Burris read it without speaking. He read it a second time. He adjusted his glasses. He read a specific section a third time. He said, "Warren." Warren said, "What is it?" Franklin Burris said, "In 1969, your father entered into an agreement with Garrett County. As part of an agricultural preservation initiative that the county ran from 1967 to 1974, a program most people have forgotten existed, your father accepted a $4,200 county payment in exchange for recording a permanent agricultural use restriction on all 300 acres. Warren said, "All right." Franklin Burris said, "That restriction is still active. It was recorded with the county clerk. It was never lifted, never challenged, never expired. And it contains a clause, paragraph 7 right here, that explicitly prohibits any financial institution from seizing or transferring the property for debt recovery purposes without a specific county commissioner exemption, an exemption that requires 90 days' notice and a public hearing." He set the document on the desk between them. He said, "The bank's foreclosure authorization is void. They cannot legally execute this transfer." He paused. "Furthermore, the 2004 lending agreement, page 31, which I'm going to request in full, almost certainly contains a title search certification, which means the bank certified in writing that they had reviewed all encumbrances on this property before issuing the credit line. If page 31 says what I think it says, they certified the absence of restrictions they were legally obligated to find. That's not just an invalid foreclosure, that's a fraudulent title certification." Warren looked at him. Franklin Burris said, "Warren, your father knew exactly what he was doing." The hearing was held in Courtroom 4 of the Garrett County Courthouse on October 28, 2022. The room was small, with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting and an American flag in the corner behind the bench. The air was cool. The room held maybe 30 people, and most of them were very quiet. Derek Ash arrived at 8:47 a.m. He had 3 lawyers with him. The bank's lead counsel was a man named Christopher Hale, 44 years old, 19 years in commercial banking litigation, gray suit, navy tie. He carried a briefcase and a second folder he had not needed to carry himself because he had an associate for that. He spoke briefly with his team in the back corner before court was called. He looked relaxed. Warren Colt arrived at 8:52 a.m. He was wearing his good shirt and his clean boots. He sat down beside Franklin Burris and set his hat on the table. The Honorable Patricia Ann Dwyer entered at 9 a.m. exactly. She had been on the Garrett County Circuit Court bench for 19 years. She had handled 14 agricultural foreclosure cases in that time. She did not waste time on ceremony. Christopher Hale spoke for 22 minutes. He was precise and confident. He walked through the 2019 policy amendment, the account reclassification, the legal basis for accelerated foreclosure under Maryland statute. He cited 3 precedents. He noted that the Colt account had not been serviced according to the bank's current repayment schedule for 31 consecutive months. He noted that the bank had made numerous attempts to contact Mr. Colt regarding the account status. He said the foreclosure was procedurally sound, legally authorized, and in full compliance with the lending agreement as modified by the 2019 amendment. He sat down. Franklin Burris stood. He placed 2 documents on the bench in front of Judge Dwyer. The 1969 Deed Restriction Agreement and page 31 of the original 2004 lending agreement obtained by subpoena 4 days earlier, the page the bank's summary had not included. He said, "Your Honor, the bank's foreclosure authorization is void under an active deed restriction recorded with Garrett County in 1969 and never legally extinguished. The restriction is present in public county records and was legally discoverable by any title search. The bank's own 2004 lending agreement, page 31, certifies that a complete title search was conducted and that no encumbrances affecting the property's transferability were identified. He paused. That certification was either incomplete or false. He sat down. Judge Dwyer read the 1969 document. The room was quiet. No one spoke. Derek Ash's lead counsel opened his mouth once and closed it again. 4 minutes and 11 seconds passed. Judge Dwyer looked up. She looked at Christopher Hale. She said, "Mr. Hale, the county recorded this restriction in September of 1969. It is still active. Your client certified in 2004 that no encumbrances of this nature existed. Can you explain how a title search conducted by your client's title company failed to surface a restriction recorded 35 years prior with the county clerk's office?" Christopher Hale said, "Your Honor, we would need additional time to review." Judge Dwyer said, "We won't be needing additional time." She ruled that the foreclosure authorization was void ab initio, void from the moment it was signed, as if it had never existed. She ruled that the bank's title certification in the 2004 lending agreement constituted a material misrepresentation under Maryland property law. She awarded Warren Elias Colt damages of $318,500, representing the assessed value of costs incurred as a result of the bank's actions, including legal fees, crop disruption costs, and statutory damages under the Maryland Consumer Protection Act. She said, "Mr. Colt, this court finds that your family's records and your father's foresight are the reason you are here today. The ruling in your favor is recorded." She closed the folder. Warren sat still. The courthouse parking lot was cold. Franklin Burris shook Warren's hand and said something Warren did not entirely hear. The bank's legal team walked to their vehicles without speaking. Derek Ash was already in his car. Warren drove home the same way he had driven to town, 24 miles on Route 135, past the grain elevator, past the volunteer fire station, past the old feed store that had been a coffee shop for 11 years now. He parked the truck in its usual spot beside the barn. He walked out through the south gate, past the winter wheat. The field was quiet, running flat and pale in the October light. He walked the 600 yards to the far edge of the south pasture, to the oak tree, to the flat stone set into the earth beneath it. He stood there for a long time. He said, "You knew." Just that, 2 words. He turned and walked back through the field. Raymond Colt spent 19 years quietly building something that outlasted him by 31 years and more. He did not hire consultants. He did not predict the future with any precision. He read a county notice in 1967 about an agricultural preservation program, thought about it for 2 years, and in September of 1969 drove to the county clerk's office and signed one document. He filed it. He kept a copy. He told his son about it the week before he died and gave it a plain envelope and 3 words. That is not luck. That is the particular patience of people who understand that land is not a transaction. It is a trust held across time, from one hand to another, and what you protect it with is not money or lawyers or courtroom arguments. It is records and time, and the quiet knowledge that someone, someday, will need what you kept. Stories like this don't get told enough. Subscribe, and we make sure they do. Next time, a 71-year-old widow in rural Alabama, a deed her husband buried in a coffee can in 1978, and a development company that bought the county assessor's records without reading all of them. We'll see you there. Paste your script.